Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Roseanne. So you've heard from my three wonderful colleagues a great deal about numerous aspects of Brexit. But what does the public make of it all? That's what I want to talk about tonight, if I can speak above the sound of the football people, football supporters, whatever. So we know that Wales voted for leave on 23rd of June last year. My slide can show that. So Wales voted for leave last year, as did the UK, both by narrow but clear margins. But what happened next? The Wales Government Centre, both before the referendum last year and subsequently, has pursued substantial research on public attitudes, encompassing numerous opinion polls, as well as a detailed academic survey, and some detailed focus group work as well. And from this, I'm just going to cull some of the major results in terms of what has happened subsequent to the referendum, in particular, have people changed their minds? Has there been any sort of fundamental change in public attitudes to Brexit in Wales since June the 23rd last year? I'll do a little bit of a spoiler now by telling you immediately what my main conclusions are. Essentially, last year we had a very close result here. Wales voted narrowly for Brexit, and things are still very much deeply divided. Wales is very much divided on Brexit, but also, as I'll explain, beneath the headline divisions on how people say would vote in a future referendum, there are substantial and indeed very deep-rooted differences between those who voted Remain last year and those who voted Leave. Differences that encompass not just whether we should remain in the EU or not, but if we're going to leave, what sort of Brexit we should be seeking, expectations about what the consequences, positive or negative, of Brexit will be, and even, as I'll explain at the end, differences that go as far as different views on what sort of political process we should follow. So not just the how of Brexit, but even, not just the what of Brexit, but even the how in terms of matters of the political and governmental process. So I'll start by looking at EU referendum voting intention. This is something that we asked in opinion polls for a couple of years leading up to the referendum last year. The polls in Wales were consistently showing this was very close. So the final narrow vote of Wales to leave should not have come as much of a shock to many people as it ultimately was. What's happened since? Well, this is all the polls that have been conducted since the referendum last year. The blue line is support for Remain. We asked people, how would you vote if there were another referendum? The red line is percentage support for Leave. Black line is don't know or would not vote. And as you can see, it's been consistently very close. The last couple of polls have shown narrow advantages for Remain, but I would caution anyone about drawing to definitive conclusions that Remain are now moving into a clear lead. These are just 4 or 5 percentage point leads for Remain, well within the sampling margin of error. The major point, I think, is that things were very close for 2 years up to the referendum, closer than the referendum themselves, and they are still close. And this continued pattern of Remain and Leave being almost indistinguishable reflects, this aggregate stability reflects substantial individual level stability as well. Sometimes you can see on these sorts of charts, not much overall change, but that reflecting lots of people moving from one side to the other and being cancelled out by people moving the other way. When we look beneath the bonnet at the details of these polls, what we find out is very few people who voted Remain last year and very few people who voted Leave have changed their minds. Almost everyone is still exactly where they were a year ago on this question. The one thing on which we have seen some change recently is attitudes to whether there should be another referendum. Until recently, we were consistently seeing in the polls that we've run on this since September fairly substantial leads for no, there shouldn't be another referendum. So in this chart, red is percentage of people saying no, there should not be another referendum on Brexit. Blue, percentage of people saying yes. We've asked this consistently since September last year, and up until the summer, big majorities of people saying no. That reflected pretty much all Leave voters from last year rejecting the idea of another referendum, but also a significant proportion of Remain voters. Essentially, it seemed accepting, look, the decision has been made, I might not agree with it, but the decision has been made, let's get on with it. What has happened in the two most recent polls is that has started to change. And we've seen in these two most recent polls significant falls, first of all, in the gap, and now in this most recent one, actually, the two sides being pretty much dead level. And that has come about through what I suppose we might call some of these soft Remainers hardening their attitudes, and a substantial increase in the proportion of Remain voters from last year who now say, yes, there should be another referendum. Okay. The other major things that we find in the research are, as I said, large differences between people who voted Remain last year and people who voted Leave on a number of different things. First of all, on the type of Brexit that we should pursue if we pursue Brexit at all. I'll give you one example of this from the detailed academic survey we ran at the end of the summer. We gave people a number of different options, and I'll just walk you through these quickly. The first option was regaining full control of how Britain is governed and who can live here, even if that means not a free trade relationship. So basically some sort of hard Brexit option we gave people. The second option was getting the best possible trade links, blah, 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 even if that still means following some EU rules, giving some control of our borders, so a softer form of Brexit. The third option was associate membership, so very close links still with the EU. The fourth option we gave people was remaining in the EU after all. Now, because they had a not sure, don't know option. Now, in this and the several following charts, there'll be a lot of bars in these bar charts on the screen. Key things to remember: black bars are for the overall sample, red bars are people who voted Leave last year, blue for people who voted Remain. And what we see on this question is, for those who voted Leave last year, nearly all of them go for this full control option. They want a hard Brexit. Of the other Leavers, the second highest proportion favour just the trade links option, the third highest proportion favour associate membership. Hardly any of them favour the Remain in the EU option, unsurprisingly. Amongst people who voted Remain last year, we see the exact opposite preference ordering. So the greatest proportion of them want to remain in the EU, second greatest group of them want associate membership, the third largest group want good trade links, very few of them support the full control, substantial independence option. So the two sides have completely contrary preferences on what sort of Brexit we should be seeking. Similarly, when we look at expectations of what Brexit will deliver, I'll give you just a few examples. I could easily put up another 20 slides to show this sort of thing. First of all, personal consequences. Will you personally be better off, worse off, or will it make no difference? Overwhelmingly, Remainers expect to be worse off as a consequence of Brexit personally. Almost none of them expect to be better off. Amongst Leave voters, actually the greater proportion of them think it'll make no difference, or they don't know, but of those with a view, far more think they'll be better off than worse off. So very substantial differences in expectations for the personal financial consequences of Brexit. When we ask about the economy generally, the impact, for instance, on unemployment, majority of Remain voters think that unemployment will be higher, almost no one thinks unemployment will be lower as a consequence of Brexit. Leave voters, actually the majority think it will be unchanged, or they don't know, but of those with a view, far more think that unemployment will be reduced by Brexit than think it will be increased. So on the impact for the economy as a whole, again, substantial differences between the two sides. When we ask about Britain's influence in the world, another dimension of this, we see the same pattern of differences. The overwhelming majority of Remain voters thinking that Britain's influence in the world will be lower, Leave voters overwhelmingly thinking that it will make no difference, or that Britain's influence in the world will be higher. And as I said, I could repeat this for numerous other things. No matter what you ask about, there are substantial differences between voters for the two sides on what they expect to follow in terms of the consequences of Brexit. But the differences go even further than this. They even relate to matters of political process. So we asked a question about once the negotiations are completed, and we were assuming here in this survey question is actually an agreement, what should happen? Which of the following should happen? Now, again, I'll just walk you through this. We gave people four basic options. First, implement it immediately. So just the deal is struck, just do it. The second option was there should be a confirmatory vote in the UK Parliament alone. The third option, the UK Parliament and the devolved Parliament should have to approve any deal. The fourth option was there should be a second referendum. Well, Leave voters, the red bars, greater proportion say implement it immediately. The second greatest proportion say a vote in the UK Parliament. Fewer of them think that the devolved Parliament should get a say, and very few of them think there should be a second referendum. Remain voters, the exact opposite preference ordering. Greatest proportion say we should have a second referendum. Somewhat fewer say the devolved Parliament and the UK Parliament, they should approve it, and that's enough. Fewer yet say only the UK Parliament approval should be needed, and very few of them say just implement it immediately. And that means, those differences mean across the whole sample, along with the don't know option, none of these four options about process get the support of even 25% of our representative sample. So there's no consensus there emerging at all. So overall, what do we see? Well, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, back in April, suggested that the country is coming together over Brexit. Well, as we in Britain often tend to say at this time of year, okay. Thank you very much.